Okay, in terms of the stuff, as always, just bad news. Someday good news, but not bad. This is PHI 3601, also known as ethics. I'm Dr. Mike LaBossiere. I got my PhD from Ohio State University back in 1993, and I've been teaching here ever since. So I'm doing this a long time, and also I'm pretty old and stuff. What we'll do today is the usual first day exciting adventure into the magical realm of the syllabus, a magic kingdom of stuff. Now, in terms of going through it to hit all the highlights, first thing for the textbook, good news is there's nothing to buy. Fortunately, when people die, well, that's not fortunate, that's unfortunate, but when people die, their works go into what's called public domain, and so the book becomes like free. And so rather than having you pay a lot of money for a book, what I did is a collection of readings, classical readings, that are the same thing you get in an anthology that you pay like $100 for, but it's free as a PDF. So there's the long and short of it is there's no textbook to buy. You just go to Blackboard. If you want to download the PDF, you got the book. My office is conveniently right across the hall, literally right over there, 2 or 3 Tucker Hall. Got my office hours, phone number, email, etc. on the syllabus, which is on Blackboard. There's a Word file. You can get the information there. Now, in terms of what the class is about, a good question, of course, would be, so what's this ethics stuff? And people probably have sort of a general idea about it. We know it deals with good and evil and all that stuff. And you've probably heard about ethical disputes. The classic ones, abortion, capital punishment, euthanasia, youth in America, that sort of stuff. And more recent ones. For example, we've got, Google. They're making, driverless cars eventually. And that raises some interesting ethical problems. For example, when you're in your 15, 20 years from now, when you're cruising around in your Google driverless car and driving by a school, a bunch of kids runs out, and the car has to decide who's it going to kill. Does it run through the kids? Does it crash into a telephone pole and kill you? What does it do? Does it activate the lasers and just pew 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 and zap all the kids? Who knows? And that's it's a practical moral problem. Who does your driverless car kill? And of course, also with technology, of various other problems, ethical problems as well. Issues like privacy. For example, there was a time, and maybe a time again, when employers were demanding access to people's Facebook accounts. You had to go as a condition of employment or applying, you had to go and give them your password so they get in and look at your stuff. And that, of course, raises moral questions. So we'll be looking through the course of the course into that ethical stuff, which deals with the basic question. Good, evil, what is that stuff? How does all that stuff work? No. The course itself, to give you sort of a quick roadmap for it, breaks down into 4 convenient parts, which also corresponds, in amazing coincidence, to the 4 tests and the 4 zones of quizzes. The first part is about ethical reasoning. We'll begin talking about the introduction to ethics, perhaps today, perhaps Wednesday, looking at what ethics is in somewhat more detail, seeing how it fits in with other areas of value like religion, law, etc. But also, most importantly, learn how to reason about ethics in terms of using logic, and we'll look at various methods that are designed specifically for moral reasoning. Things like appeals to consequences, appeals to rights, that sort of stuff. Now, the reason for this is in large part because, well, 2 main reasons. One is ethical reasoning is important because we face moral problems every day just as people, but also, of course, as professionals. Whatever profession you go into, there will be moral issues. You go into, say, medicine, the medical ethics. Things about medical issues there include ethics of treatments. For example, if there is a treatment that could keep your patient living longer, but a never lower quality of life, should you preserve life at all costs? Or is it better sometimes to let people die? Or another example of medical ethics would be, suppose you're a doctor and a pharmacy rep comes in and says, hey, if you prescribe our drug, good things will happen to you. Money, you'll get speaking opportunities and so forth. And should you accept the money or not? Then, of course, other professional ethics would be things like in law, all kinds of ethics there, or in business, or any part of life. And so ethics is all over the place. Second thing is in regards, of course, to the course itself. One of the requirements is a paper in ethics, and I work from the assumption that people have not taken philosophy before, let alone ethics, and I work from the assumption that people have no idea how to do a ethics paper. If you do, you've got to step up. If you don't, that's the assumed point. So you'll get all the stuff you need to do a paper for the course. So a large chunk of that is getting ready for that paper. So in part one, introduction to ethics and moral reasoning, learning how to reason about good and bad and all that stuff. In part two, we'll look at ethical theory. People have been addressing moral problems since there have been people. And over the centuries, people have tried to work out theories that attempt to explain, give accounts for what is good, what is evil, what's the basis of this, how should we live our lives. And we'll look at some of the sort of classic and important ones. We'll begin looking at one of the oldest ones, virtue theory, which is the idea that you should be a virtuous person. And we'll look at our good dead friend Confucius. Everyone's probably heard of that fairly famous dead guy. We'll also look at Aristotle, another famous dead guy. Aristotle was a student of Plato, teacher of Alexander the Great, wrote a lot of stuff, died, still dead today. But he advocated a view about virtue theory. And one of the things that's the sort of hallmark of virtue theory, most people are probably familiar with it, is the idea is you should not take things to excess or deficiency, but just right. In many ways, as we'll see, virtue theory is kind of the Goldilocks theory of ethics. Everyone knows the story of Goldilocks. She traipses through the woods, gets a little hungry, sees the bear's house, pops through the window, sees the porridge. And of course, one is too hot, one is too cold, but one is just right. Then the bears come back and call the police and arrest her because that's breaking and entering and that. So Goldilocks, you should learn not to steal stuff, especially from bears. But anyways, with virtue theory, the idea is to hit that middle ground between too much and too little. And we'll look at our good dead friend Aristotle and Confucius and see what they have to say about being good. Now, another area in which ethics derives a very old foundation is, of course, religion. And many people, especially today, derive their moral principles, their moral behavior, from their professed religious beliefs, either for what we consider good behavior. For example, there are people who, because, say, they're Christian or Buddhist, they're very kind and generous, care about others, love thy neighbor as thyself type of deal. And we think of that as good. Then, of course, there are also people who base their ethics on theology or in organizations like ISIS. And they're like beheading people and doing that kind of stuff. We think of that as kind of bad. But they're basing their ethics on religion. And so we'll look at that, specifically looking at two important examples. One will be from our good dead friend, looking at Thomas Aquinas, talking about ethics. We'll also look at our good dead friend John Duns Scotus, also talking about this. Then we'll go on to well, that's sort of what it wants to do. So then we'll go on to look at two, sorry, some technical difficulties. We'll go on to look at two of the very common and popular views. One is what's called utilitarianism. It's the idea, to put it in bumper sticker terms, that one should do the greatest good for the greatest number. Or to put it in Star Trek terms, that the good of the many outweighs the good of the few, or the one. Or to put it in kind of mean terms, the ends justify the means, which can be kind of mean. We'll look at our good dead friend John Stuart Mill. English guy, wrote some stuff, pretty smart guy, went crazy, got better, wrote some more stuff, died, still dead today. Then we'll look at our next major guy is a fellow named Immanuel Kant. He wrote in the context of what's called deontology, specifically rules following. If you're a utilitarian and you drove a car, if you're a nice utilitarian, your bumper sticker would say the greatest good for the greatest number. If you're a deontologist like Kant, it would say obey the rules. For someone like Kant, the idea is there are strict moral rules, being good is following those rules. Many religious-based ethics take a rule-based approach. Classic example, of course, 10 Commandments. It gives you a set of rules. Do this, do this, do this, don't do that. You know, the 10 Commandments plus the 11th, which is, of course, don't get caught. Which the folks with those Ashley Madison, kind of probably wish they didn't do that now. But anyways, that's an ethical thing as well. If you're interested in ethics and technology, that could be something to write about. Then we'll turn from looking at deontology to looking at our last thing in this section, which is what's called ethical relativism. Everyone's probably heard the expression, when in Rome, do the Romans, and get the pizza, because it's pretty good. If you're an ethical relativist, you take the view that when in Rome, not only do as the Romans, but the Romans are right, because it's Rome. And relativism is, pretty popular. It's a view that morality depends on your culture. Then we'll move away from the realm of theory, and there's a multitude of theories. There are thousands upon thousands of theories. We'll just sort of look at some of the major ones, but then we'll go on to part 3, looking at goodness and equality. One fundamental question in ethics, brought forth most famously by our good dead friend Plato, is the question of why be good, which seems to rest on the assumption that being bad is better, is more fun. And so Plato asks, why be good? And the usual answer is, well, if you're bad, people might, take issue with that and do bad stuff too. And so he sort of ups the game. And he says, well, what if you get away with being bad? If no one could do anything to you, and you could be really, really bad and never get punished, but everyone thought you were really good. And so he raises the challenge to look at the ring of Gyges, which is, if you could be as bad as you wanted to be and never get punished, and everyone thought you were great, why would you have every reason to be good? Why not be evil? And evil is a growth industry. They're always hiring. And they have good dental. Well, evil dental. Nothing about it is good. Then we'll turn to the question of, if we think people should be good, how do we go about making them good? Which is the topic of moral education. We'll look at our good dead friend Aristotle again, and we'll see a system that we're very familiar with, which in many ways our education system resembles what he proposed, which is basically making people good through compulsion and habituation. If you ever raised a dog, it will seem very similar to Aristotle's method. Then we'll turn to an opposing viewpoint from our good dead friend Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And he takes the view that people should follow nature, that nature is the teacher, and we shouldn't impose this morality on people. Then we'll turn to equality. One of the fundamental sort of struggles, battles in the world, especially the United States, has been over inequality. And we'll look at 3 key areas here. First, we'll begin with gender equality, or inequality, depending on how you look at it, with our good friend Mary Wollstonecraft. And she wrote a classic piece on the rights of women, looking at the issue of gender equality, and still, of course, relevant today. Then we'll turn to race, looking at I Have a Dream by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and then finally we'll close looking at non-humans, namely the other creatures that inhabit the planet with us. Are they entitled to rights? Or does the fact that they're so delicious, does that doom them to being served up as food forever? Then in part 4, we'll turn to rights and liberty, also critical issues. We'll begin looking at 2 classic foundations to our belief in rights. Because in the West, we believe rights to all kinds of things. Life, liberty, property. Also, of course, rights to privacy, etc. And our foundation for our discussions about rights come, in large part from the English, tradition, but from two major thinkers here. Probably the two big thinkers about rights are our good dead friend Thomas Hobbes. If you ever saw the movie The Hunger Games, they're all killing each other, that will seem very familiar because Hobbes says we got to have government because otherwise, basically Hunger Games 24/7. We didn't put it quite that way, but Hunger Games basically captures Hobbes' state of nature. If you ever read the book Lord of the Flies, I think they still make people, I had to read it, and I think the curriculum is the same as it's been for like 1,000 years. You better read it too. And so you've got a little look at it's kind of the stuff Hobbes is talking about. And he argues basically we got to have government because otherwise it's going to be like that. And then he tries to work out a system of rights. Then we'll turn to a kindler, gentler view of rights from our good dead friend John Locke. He put forth the notion of the right to life, liberty, and property. Now, in the Declaration of Independence, of course, it's pursuit of happiness, because the people writing it, as one of my professors once said, had all the property, and they didn't want people getting ideas about taking their stuff. So you can pursue happiness all you want, because that doesn't cost anything. Getting it costs quite a bit. Well, you can't buy happiness, but you can rent it. And if you have enough money, you can rent it until you die, which is kind of the same thing. Anyways. But Locke came up with the notion of rights. Interesting, as we'll see, if you follow politics, you might have heard the great political philosopher Sarah Palin talk about how the United States Constitution is based on God. And Sarah was totally right. John Locke bases his moral view on God. And the Constitution is theoretically based in large part on Locke's right. So Sarah Palin kind of got it right. Good work, Sarah. Then we'll turn from rights to liberty. Now, every society faces the classic balance between preserving order and security, keeping us safe, and preserving freedom. And one of the fundamental questions is working that out. How should we balance that out? After, of course, as everyone says, after 9/11, we started moving towards more security. So, for example, we had the programs where the government was just scooping up all this data. If you had a phone or email during that time, that stuff's been scooped up. Interesting, anybody here ever use like Yahoo, Messenger or chat? If you did, the government has all your stuff. For real. They actually had guidelines for the people who are going through it, warning them that they may see basically naked people. And they said, so they had all these guidelines for handling, like, you're not allowed to share pictures of the office or joke about it. You have to be serious in looking at naked people. Anyway, it's pretty fun. Well, unless your pictures are on the government's files. And so there is that, the questions about those rights. Should we trade off our liberty, our freedom not to be spied on, in order to be safer? And that's one of the questions we'll address. There's also the questions about, obedience. Should we obey the state when it tells us to do stuff? So in regards to those questions, we'll look at our good dead friend Plato, talking about obedience in the Crito. We'll look at our good dead friend Henry David Thoreau, the originator of civil disobedience, an early anarchist, arguing for disobeying on moral grounds. And then we'll close up with liberty, looking at one extreme, Mussolini, who argued for fascism. Basically, very, very limited, almost no liberty. And then we'll look at our good dead friend John Stuart Mill, arguing for the view that we should be free to do whatever doesn't hurt other people. So kind of his test is this. So you want to do this. Would this hurt other people? If the answer is no, totally okay. But you might say, what if it hurts yourself? Well, you should know better. That's basically his view. So his view is roughly put, you can do whatever you wish, provided it doesn't hurt other people. Classic principle of harm. And that will be our 4 parts. So part 1, ethical reasoning. How to reason about the ethics stuff. Part 2, what have these, dead guys and gals said about the ethics stuff. Part 3, looking at goodness and equality, why be good, why not, how to become good, and issues of equality, gender, race, and species. And then we'll close with the rights and liberty. What rights do we have, what's our foundation, and how free should we be? Before pressing on to the Grady stuff, anything about the stuff so far that needs more stuff. And I do use the word stuff a lot. It's a compulsion. There is no cure. Now, in terms of the grade, your grade in the course rests on three main factors: the paper, the exams, and the quizzes. Now, I guess the good news, I suppose it's good or at least neutral, is that the exams and quizzes are all on Blackboard, and you can take them pretty much at your own time. Also, with the paper, it's turned in through Blackboard, so you don't have to worry about like getting it printed up and rushing in the last minute. You can just go to Blackboard and upload it. So, basically, 21st century or late 20th century technology at work. So how does this stuff, break down? How's it done? Well, I'll do the easiest stuff first and go to the paper. For the exams, there's a total of 5. The best 4 out of 5 count. There's one exam for each section, and the 4 exams are non-comprehensive. So section 1, exam 1 covers that, and just that. Exam 2 covers section 2, etc. So the first 4 exams just cover their own section. Each one is 50 questions. There's half true false, half multiple choice about the notes, the readings. And once you start the test, you get 1 hour to complete it. And the timer is going. To use a crappy analogy, it's like going to the movie. Buy a ticket, go to the movie starts, and you can leave anytime you want, but the movie keeps on going. If you come back, the movie's still going. So once you fire it up, be sure you get an hour or as much time as you need, up to an hour, to finish it. If something goes wrong, and Blackboard is infested with demons, so something will go wrong, just send an email with your name, the class, and saying what went wrong. And I can do basically, I have 2 options. One is by default one, if you don't tell me otherwise, I just clear it. And you probably had this done before, just resets it to blank slate. Then you have to do it over again. The other option is I can submit it as is, which is generally, well, I guess if you get to if you're 99% done, you're heck with this, then you might want to have it just submitted. But my default is just to clear it so you can redo it. But if you do want it submitted as is, let me know. That's also an option. Now, with the 4 out of 5 counting, this allows a couple of options. One is, probably the best one is this. Since it has 4 out of 5 count, that means that the final could be dropped. Because you did 4, and you look at your overall grade and you're satisfied with it, and you say, I really don't want to do that final thing. Well, you'd get a 0 on the final, but since the best 4 out of 5 count, it would just be dropped off. So that's one option, probably the best one. Thanks, but no thanks final. The other option, which is less awesome, but useful, is if you've done the 4 exams and you don't quite have the grade you want, then you can take the final, or you can take it anyways. And if the final is better than one of the other 4, it replaces them, because they're all weighted equally, but it keeps the best 4. So if you don't have the grade you want, take the final, maybe that'll help out. Now, taking more stuff can never lower your grade, because it keeps the best 4 out of 5 exams, and as we'll see, the best 10 quizzes. So if you've got the 4 exams, you're like, well, maybe I can do better. Taking the final is risk-free. It can't lower your grade, because if you do worse on the final, it gets dropped. If you do better, it replaces one of the other exams. The final, however, can cause emotional damage, but by enrolling in the class, you have signed a waiver that basically, makes me not responsible for that type of stuff. It's not that bad. Okay, yeah, it is. Now, so the normal exams, again, 1 hour, 50 questions, you get an hour to go through them. The final is slightly more obnoxious. You get 2 hours to do it, but it's 100 questions. But it counts as the same as the others. Basically, the final's there sort of as a sort of like in case you need it sort of deal. So, but again, you get 2 hours once you start it up, and it just counts as one of the exams. If you do worse, it gets dropped. If you do better, it gets kept. So those are the exams. Oh, and also lastly, the final is comprehensive. So the 4 exams just cover their own section, the final pulls stuff randomly out of all of it. And all of the exams are randomly generated within their area. And they're worth 40% in total. Before we go on to the quizzes, anything about the exams, it needs more exam stuff. Okay. Quizzes. Lots of quizzes. I think I got like 23, 24, 25. I just keep adding more. Because, you know, why not? The good news is the best 10 of them count. So however many there are, you just need 10 good ones. And once you get 10 perfect quizzes, you'd be quiz capped. If you keep taking more, it won't, won't help your quiz grade. It won't hurt your quiz grade either. If you have less than 10 perfect quizzes though, it's always a good idea, almost always a good idea to keep taking them until you get like 100%. And again, the best 10 of them count, and they're 30%. The quizzes are pretty straightforward. They're on a timer. Once you fire them up, you get 5 minutes, but they're just 5 questions, true or false. And each quiz says what it's about. They're originally designed back in the ancient days before the interwebs. I'd do the quizzes like in class back in those primitive days. We'd gather around the fire, ward off the dinosaurs, and I would read the quizzes aloud, and people would chisel it into the stone tablets. But now, of course, thanks to the magic of the interwebs, it can all be done through the magic of the interwebs. Yeah, so the quizzes are, it'll say what the quiz is about, what reading it comes from, and once you fire it up, you get 5 minutes. And best 10 of them count, and there's bunches of them. So those are the exams and quizzes. Now, the exams and quizzes have deadlines to them. The deadline basically is when they stop becoming available on Blackboard. And the deadlines are always, well, except for the final, is always end of day, 11:59 p.m. Then they go, whoop, de-availabilized. The scores, of course, are kept. If you haven't done it by then, they become unavailable. Now, the final, slightly different. The way I do the final is I set it up just, since the final is a final exam schedule, to be, totally fair, you get the full amount of time you'd have normal back in the days of, dinosaurs and, stone tablets. And so you get until the end of that final time, which would be December 11th, that Friday at noon. Now, all this stuff is up and available now, and was available last week, so you can do stuff ahead of time. If you want to go and, tear through the quizzes and exams and so forth, you can do it at your own pace. One thing I recommend, though, is I've had people try to complete classes like really quick. My critical inquiry class had a graduating senior in philosophy, knocked that out in 2 weeks, just, A++. I don't know why I was taking a freshman class as a senior, but there you go. And then someone else, tried to knock through it, and they get into the F zone, and then I, reset all their tests for them so they can try at it again. So, good idea is to see how things are going before trying to zip through everything. Now, one way you can tell how things are going, there's also 4 practice exams, and the way the practice exams work is they don't count for you or against you. So they're no risk. They don't help you, but they don't hurt you. And what they do is they let you see the sort of questions that I'll ask, like on quizzes and tests, and you can take them, and it'll give you, at the end, it'll tell you, how many you get right, how many you get wrong, give you all the answers, and that way it serves a couple of useful functions. One is, you can see the sort of questions I'm likely to ask, in fact, the questions I do ask, without any risk, rather than going to the test and saying, oh, so that's how he writes questions. You can see ahead of time. Just go, fire up the sample exam, look at it, see what likely is to show up. Secondly, there can be, the samples are drawn from the real question banks, so there's a slight chance of some overlap. Thirdly, it'll tell you how you do in the real test. Same sort of questions. If the sample goes well for you, the real test will probably go well. If the sample is a disaster, the real test will probably be a disaster. So if it's disastrous, you probably want to go back and do some stuff to de-disasterize that scenario. So those are the exams and the quizzes. Before going to the most evil thing of all, the paper, anything about exams or quizzes that needs more stuff?
With the sample exam, if we see at the end our results, can we take it again, over and over, or just that one time?
No, you can go back and keep unlimited times. Okay, anything else? Okay, the paper. There's one paper, and it's 1 for 1. Basically, it counts. The paper is 30%. Now for the paper, I'll go over this in much more detail when we talk about the paper. There's some different deadlines. The first one is for the draft. Now, the draft then is optional in the sense that people ask, well, what if I don't do a draft? What happens? Of course I say, fire and blood shall rain from the sky, the doom of the earth. No, that's not true. What happens if you don't do the draft is basically you just don't do the draft. And what you're essentially doing is you're letting it all ride. You're putting it on the table, hoping that paper is going to work out. And so it depends on how confident you are and how well the paper is going to work out. And sometimes it works out pretty well. People, if they've had classes with it before, written ethics papers or other papers before, they know what they're going to do. Sometimes people let it ride and boom, the roulette wheel catches on fire, explodes, and takes down the whole casino. Sometimes it's awful. Now, if you're not completely confident in your ability to produce the grade you want on an ethics paper, then a draft is a good idea. And what you do is, to do a draft, you can do as many drafts as you want until either you get the grade you want. Like whenever I mark the draft, I'll put a hypothetical grade on it. Then you can decide, well, I'm done, get the grade I want. Or you get sick of the process, you're like, oh God, I can't take any more of this. Or option 3 is the time runs out. Not all time, but draft time. And for a draft, you just print it, and people often ask, common questions are, can I do many drafts? The answer is yeah, many as you want until time runs out, or you get sick of it. People ask, well, can I turn in a draft if I haven't got it all done yet? Yeah, you can turn in what you got. I'll put the hypothetical grade on it, which will probably be pretty awful, but yeah. And third use of the question is, well, how do I do a draft? And the idea is just print it up, turn it into me. You can either give it to me in class, in which case I'll have it back to you the next day, or you can bring it to my office hours. Depending on how early you get it to me, I might be able to, it takes me about 15 minutes to go through a draft, maybe I'll get back to you right away. So basically, or you can drop it in, I get a drop envelope on my office, you drop it in there, I check it every time I come in, and what I'll do is, if there's a draft there, mark it up, and you can let me know whether you want it brought back in class, or if you want me to just leave it in the drop envelope, the pickup envelope, where you can just get it at your convenience. So a good question to be is, so what's paper about? How awful is it? Etc. Well, we'll go over in painful detail, in fact, with PowerPoint, exactly how to do this, but here's sort of the lead-in stuff. First, if you want to know right now what the paper is about, what you can do if you go on Blackboard, there's one of the folders is the paper. And in there is a PDF file which goes through beginning to end, exactly how to do the paper, step by step, along with a complete sample paper showing exactly what a paper would look like, sort of thing I'm looking for. There's also a PowerPoint for the paper, and there's 3 videos for the paper. One is like on the draft, one is how to turn it in, and one is for writing the paper itself. We'll also go over the paper in class. So it's basically those ways to get the paper. Read the PDF, you can watch the video, look at the PowerPoint, and also we'll go over it in class. So that way everyone knows what the paper's about. So what is the paper about? Well, here's the gist of it. Paper is going to a class, so got to do the word count. And the paper is an ethical issue paper. What you'll do is you'll pick a topic in ethics, an issue, and take a side on that issue. And you have to take a definite side. You don't have to believe it. I have no way of knowing what you believe unless you tell me. But you just have to pick a side on that issue. And then the paper breaks down like this. There'll be an introduction where you intro. Then there'll be an argument section where you set up the issue, provide whatever background's needed, and then you argue for your position, the one you take. Then the third part, you raise an objection. Basically, you argue against yourself. And then you reply back to that to show why you were right all along anyways, when the paper closes. So essentially, you're considering both sides, but you have a definite side yourself. So it's not compare and contrast. It's not they say this, they say that. It's here's my view, here's why I'm right. Here's an argument or arguments against me, but here's how I handle those arguments. I got the, again, I'll go over the page count, exactly how to set it up, picking the issue, etc. But that's the gist of it. Now I've got a PDF file with a whole bunch of topics. You can pick any of those. Also, since there's potentially an infinite number of ethical problems, you can pick your own. The one thing that I do require, though, is that if you pick your own, let me know what it is. Like, say, either send me an email saying, hey, I'd like to do this. Is this like a topic? Or ask me, like, right after class and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is that like ethics? And the reason why I want people to check with me is because it's bad to turn in a paper that has nothing to do with ethics. I mean, it'd be like taking a French class and turning in like a chemistry lab report. It may be an awesome chem lab report, but it's not in French. It has nothing to do with the course. Or like if you're a restaurant and you order a meal and they bring you a really nice, say, book. Maybe a cool book, but you're kind of looking for, for a meal. And I've got an interesting paper. So I got a paper on management practices in deciduous forests. I learned a lot about deciduous forests. Learned a lot about squirrels and why they're evil. Other people write about, parenting techniques. So I guess I know how to raise kids. I haven't tested it, so I don't know if it works or not. probably should read some more books before trying that though. They're like dogs, right? You just feed them. I handle dogs. I kept my dogs alive, so I make great things, I'm sure. But it's a good idea to check to make sure that it's on something. And you can take almost anything and put it into a moral issue. For example, you could take forest management and turn it into a moral issue. So it could be something like, does the federal government have a moral right to restrict access to federal lands to preserve the environment? Boom, moral issue. Or morally, should parents use coercive techniques to raise their children? Or put another way, is spanking morally okay? So pretty much anything you think of, you could put a moral thing on it. Really, all you have to do is just say, is blank okay or no? And you could take just about anything. So you can pick any topic that you're interested or bored the least with. But again, it's a good idea to say, I'm thinking about doing this. Would this be, okay? Now, some stuff are already, clearly set up as a moral issue. If your topic is, I'm interested in whether, the pricing of pharmaceuticals is morally acceptable or not. Well, that's clearly a moral issue. If your thing's got moral in it, probably okay. And again, we'll go over in painful detail how to write the paper. Very painful detail. Now, the breakdown is basically this. If you want to do a draft, be sure the draft is to me by November 16th. If you want to get, this is the extra credit thing. If you want to get +5 in your paper, be sure it's uploaded to Blackboard by end of day, November 18th, and you get your base score +5, just for being you and just for turning the paper in then. But suppose the paper is not ready on November 18th. Suppose something goes wrong. The demons of Blackboard rise up against you. Well, I have an emergency deadline on November 25th. True, right before Thanksgiving, but you don't have to be here to turn it in. You just got to have access to Blackboard and turn it in that way. The emergency deadline is full credit. Basically, the real deadline, of course, November 18th, you get +5 for being on time. And then there's a week after that in case something goes wrong. Because the paper is supposed to be done and turned in on the 18th, but things happen. Life is tough, and things go wrong. And so if things go wrong, you get that extra week. No questions asked. As long as the paper appears magically on Blackboard by November 25th, you'll get that full credit. But suppose things, person's like, I don't really like that full point then. I don't want that bonus, I don't want those full points. Well, December 4th, deadline for half credit. That's like super desperation. That's like, well, yeah, I guess I kind of want to graduate, but I didn't really feel like writing a paper, so can I get some points? And believe it or not, people can, in fact, the reason why I do this is exactly for the person who's like, crap, I didn't do anything, but I kind of want to graduate type of scenario. And it can be done, because the paper is, 30%, and getting half of something is better than all or nothing, unless it's like death. I take none of that. But you can still pass. Not a great strategy, but doable. Okay, last couple things. Deadline stuff. For all the stuff, there are particular deadlines. And again, the deadlines are when it becomes non-available on Blackboard. So you want to have it done by then. So the quizzes for part 1, they vanish September 18th. Not your scores, but the access to them. Exam 1, quizzes part 2, go down October 16th. Now, exam 1 covers part 1. We'll finish that September 18th. But you get an extra, rather than mess around with makeups and I hate those things, back in the days with stone tablets and stuff, you get like an extra month. So this is when you should have exam 1 done, but life is tough. So you get an extra month to finish that, to get it completed by then. Just be sure to get exam 1 done by then. On November 13th, quizzes of part 3 deadline and the exam number 2 deadlines. December 4th, lots of stuff going on December 4th. Exam 3 deadlines, exam 4 deadlines, and quizzes part 4 deadline, because that's the last day of classes, and all that's left is the final. The exam number 5 deadlines on December 11th at noon. So these are all end of day, 11:59, 59 p.m., but this is at noon. And I'll send out, reminders like, this deadline's coming up. Probably, hoping stuff is done by then. Okay, last final 2 things before we end. There's all kinds of, well, basically 3 last things. First and last thing, there's all kinds of policies and procedures on the syllabus, which I will not read out to you because that will bore both of us. Secondly, there's the unusual or special circumstance thing. If you find yourself in unusual or special circumstances that affect the class, let me know. And I'll make all reasonable accommodations to accommodate all unusual circumstances that are relevant to class. But you can let me know, and let me know in a timely manner, preferably before the end of the semester, and definitely before 2016. Next to last thing, academic learning compacts. I've got them on there. Essentially, we're looking at critical thinking stuff, methodology, etc., etc. This way, if an administrator says, "Can you speak of the ALC?" Yes, and they're laid out on the syllabus. And lastly, there's the Quality Enhancement Plan, or QEP, Enhancing Performance in Critical Thinking. We will enhance quality to a degree that would make Trump proud. It'll be quality all the way. We'll enhance quality in regards to critical thinking, basically by part 1, looking at ethical reasoning, critical methodology. So if an administrator says to you, "Did he speak of the QEP?" you can say, "Yes, the words were spoken. It's spoken by him." Okay, so that brings us to the end of the stuff for today. Be sure, if you didn't get a chance to sign in on the thing, so I can put you down as attending, which will lift the hold on your money so that evil money can flow to you, so you can make your moral decision. Next time, more stuff. Thank you.